Welcome to the Neighborhood Law Center. I'm your host, Melvin Burruss, and my guest today is attorney Rob
Poggenklass.
He's attorney of civil rights and restoration at
Legal Aid Justice Center.
Legal Aid Justice Center. And our title today is Expungement or Sealed Records. So Counsel, I'm going to let you just take it from there and maybe just tell the audience a little bit about yourself as well as the subject matter we'll be going into.
Sure. So I am an attorney at the Legal Aid Justice Center, which is based here in Charlottesville. We're a nonprofit organization serving low-income folks in civil legal matters. So we have offices in Charlottesville, Falls Church, Richmond, and Petersburg, but we're a statewide organization. As far as my own background, I graduated from the William and Mary School of Law in 2010. I became a public defender, worked in Newport News in that role for 3.5 years, representing indigent defendants in criminal cases. And then I went and worked at the ACLU of Virginia for 2 years doing criminal justice policy work. From there, I went back to my home state of Iowa for 3.5 years, where I got into legal aid. And that's really when I started working on expungement and helping people clear their criminal records, as well as fines and fees and the complications that come from having a criminal past. So then 2 years ago, April 2020, moved back here to Virginia and settled in Charlottesville, and that's when I started at LAJC. In addition to my full-time job at LAJC, I also teach the Civil Rights Clinic at the University of Virginia School of Law, so happy to work with them.
No, it's good to have you here today. You're bringing a lot to the city of Charlottesville and to the legal field here. So what is expungement, and why should people really care about expungement?
Sure. Expungement, I think, is best understood as removing, erasing someone's criminal record. Criminal records, I think for a long time, people didn't worry quite as much about them before the internet. Now with the ubiquity of the internet, anyone can go online and find someone's criminal record in a matter of minutes. And so we've seen employers and landlords, the vast majority of them do criminal background checks every time someone applies for a job, applies for housing. And so criminal records have really become a major barrier to the folks that have them. And these are not small numbers of people we're talking about. We're talking about a third of American adults have some type of criminal record. So this is a problem for a large number of folks.
A segment of our population.
Mm-hmm. And we know that the criminal legal system disproportionately affects Black people.
That's okay. So what kind of criminal records can a person expunge in Virginia, let's say?
So for the last 40 or so years, Virginia has had one of the most restrictive laws on expungement in the country. Virginia is one of about 7 or 8 jurisdictions nationwide that does not allow a person to expunge any type of conviction. So if you go to trial or you plead guilty to a criminal charge, that record is going to stay with you for the rest of your life in Virginia. And under Virginia's only expungement law, which was passed in 1977, you can expunge some non-conviction records. So lots of folks are arrested or they're charged with a crime, but they're never actually convicted. The charge is either dropped or they're found not guilty, or there's a case of mistaken identity or something like that, and they were wrongfully charged. Those records can be expunged in Virginia, and that has been the law for the last 45 years. It's only in the last year that Virginia has moved to allow sealing of criminal convictions. And that is going to make a massive difference in people's lives.
Okay, what is the situation now with the new administration coming in? You think it's going to stay the same, or is going to be some changes?
So we'll see. I think before I talk about the new administration, I want to talk about the law that we got passed in 2021. So, as I said, from 1977 to 2021, the only things you can expunge in Virginia are criminal charges that were dropped or where you were found not guilty or dismissed. In 2021, the General Assembly passed a law that will take effect in July of 2025. So it's not the law yet, but it will take effect in 3.5 years. And that law is going to allow people to seal criminal convictions for the first time in Virginia. So almost every type of misdemeanor, if you go 7 years from the date of your conviction and you don't have any new convictions, then you can seal that misdemeanor conviction. And with some lower level felonies as well, we're going to have the ability to petition a court and seal felony convictions in Virginia in 2025. And then there's another part of the law that is going to automatically seal. So typically when you go to expunge or seal a record, you have to petition a court. You have to go through a process. You usually need a lawyer to do that. And people who can't afford lawyers are going to be able to get a court-appointed lawyer to help them with the record sealing process. But for some small group of offenses, the state is going to automatically seal the records. So things like possession of marijuana or petty larceny, underage possession of alcohol, those trespassing, those types of offenses are going to be automatically sealed. The person who has the record won't have to do anything.
After 7 years.
After 7 years, the state will automatically seal those records. And when we talk about criminal records, I think it's important for folks to know there are two types of criminal records in Virginia. When you are arrested and charged with a crime, there's two different records created. One is created by the law enforcement agency that arrested you, and that record is held by the Virginia State Police at their headquarters in Chesterfield. Then there's another record that is created by the court, and in the form of the physical document, the warrant or the summons, the charge that you're given when you're charged with a crime. And so when we're talking about sealing, we're talking about getting rid of both of those records. And so it's really important because the employers and the landlords are often looking at the police records, which are held by the state police and can be obtained by private background check companies, which is often how employers and landlords take a look at your record. But then there's also the court records, which can appear online. If you go to the Virginia court's website, you can just search a person's name and find all the charges that they have on their record. So getting rid of both of those records is what expungement and sealing accomplishes.
Yeah, it'd be a coordinated effort rather than a piecemeal one. Well, we got a new General Assembly coming in today. How do you think this law will be standing up with it now that we got new players in the General Assembly?
So we have already seen the bills dropping every day this week. There's about 1,500 bills as I checked my computer before I left for here this morning. And they're coming at this issue from both sides. So the first bill that we saw would be a full repeal of what we accomplished last year that would just remove all the new record sealing laws from the books and go back to where we were in 1977. So LAJC is going to oppose that bill strongly. Good. But then we've got other bills that I think will be bipartisan and would expand on the law that we got passed last year. So Delegate Coiner in the House, who's a Republican, she has introduced a bill that would eliminate the lifetime limit. So there's in the current law as it's enacted and will go into effect in 2025, people will only be able to seal 2 criminal events in their lifetime. And then they're done. They can't seal anything more. Her bill would repeal that so that if you've got old records and maybe you have 3 of them, you'll be able to get rid of all of them, not just 2. And then she'd also cut down the wait time. So right now for misdemeanors, you have to wait 7 years. Mm-hmm. Under Delegate Coyner's bill, you'd only have to wait 5 years. And that's important because if a person goes 5 years without committing a new crime, the likelihood that they're going to commit other new crimes is very low. So we think 5 years is an appropriate wait time. And then she would add a few more offenses to the ones that are in the automatic side. So this petition process can be really difficult. It can be difficult for folks to navigate going back to the court system to try and get their records sealed. So it's important that we have more offenses be automatically sealed. And she would add some really common criminal charges in her bill. Driving on a suspended license or driving without a license are some common charges that people have, and those would be automatically sealed after 5 years under the new legislation.
Okay, where does a person start out at if they want to get their record expunged? I'm a felon on my record. How do I get it expunged? What do I do? What's the process?
Sure. Well, you might want to consult an attorney if you're going to go through this process. I mean, it is possible to do it by yourself, but I don't think Virginia makes it too easy. As an attorney who's done a number of expungement cases, I can say that you're going to run into some hiccups along the way. Mm-hmm. So I think finding someone who's gone through it before, and legal aid organizations are a good place to start there. I know in some other parts of the state, legal aid organizations have partnered with private attorneys who will volunteer their time pro bono.
Is there a requirement to be a legal aid client? Is it a...
No, legal aid organizations are just there to help people who can't afford to hire an attorney. So if you can afford to hire an attorney, good for you.
What's the threshold?
It's
how much you have to
I believe LAJC's is 200% of federal poverty guidelines. So I don't know the exact federal poverty guidelines number, but I remember, I think it was $14,000 or $15,000 a year income. So we're talking about 200% of that. So if someone making under $30,000 a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So under $30,000, you have the benefit of going to the legal aid to get some help on this. Mm-hmm. So what's the next step after we go into the legal aid system?
Sure. So again, the new law has not taken effect yet, so we don't know quite what that process is yet. But under the old law, the one that allows people to expunge non-convictions, the process is going to be you file a petition in circuit court, and the opposing party in these cases is the Commonwealth of Virginia. So the people who were prosecuting you for the charge originally, they're going to be the ones who could object to your petition for expungement. So you file a petition in circuit court, you get service on the Commonwealth's attorney. Usually you get the sheriff involved to serve the Commonwealth, and then the case goes forward. You have to get your fingerprints done at a law enforcement agency under the old law. Under the new law, we've eliminated that requirement because that was a big barrier for folks who had a hard time finding, just going into a law enforcement agency and paying whatever fee that the law enforcement agency is going to charge. Sometimes they're not taking fingerprints at certain hours. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just traumatic to go back to the law enforcement agency where you were wrongfully charged in the first place. So that was a barrier, and it's going to be removed under the new law. But under the old law, you have to get your fingerprints done. Fingerprints go off to the state police. The state police returns that to the court, and then the case can proceed. That process usually takes about a month. And then the Commonwealth decides whether they're going to object to your petition for expungement. So it's not automatic that you're going to get a charge expunged just because you filed the petition. The Commonwealth will weigh in, and then if they're going to object, there will be a hearing, and a judge will decide.
Okay. What about if someone had a felon from out of state, outside of Virginia? How do they go about getting expungement then?
So they'll have to expunge that record in the state where the felony was committed.
Same process, but they have to. Virginia won't.
Well, different laws, different expungement laws in every state in the country. So like I mentioned, Virginia is one of only about 7 or 8 places where you can't expunge a criminal conviction.
Right.
So there are really different laws. There are places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Connecticut, California that have really progressive expungement laws and allow people to get things expunged automatically or to expunge felonies through a petition process. And then there are other states, my home state of Iowa, you can't expunge a felony conviction.
Yeah. Is there a cost for these people, for folks to get the records?
So,
well, let's talk about expungement versus sealing of records.
Sure.
What's the difference between record sealing and expungement?
Yeah. So when we first started advocating, we were calling it expungement, and we still call it expungement. But expungement in Virginia, it really applies to the old law, the 1977 law,
Okay.
where you're expunging non-convictions. And that law was really designed and passed to help innocent people. So people who were wrongfully accused, people who've been absolutely pardoned by a governor once the wrongful conviction was discovered, people who were tried by a jury and found not guilty. That's what that law is really designed for. And once a record gets expunged under the old law, then really no one has access to it. There's only a couple situations where a prosecutor can get a court order to look at the record, but it is really hidden from everyone. When a record is sealed under the new law, and it's going to look, the process is going to be similar, but the record itself is going to continue to exist, and only a few people will have access to it, and namely the clerk of court. And then if you still owe fines and fees or something like that on the charge, the clerk will be able to access it for, to accept the payment of fees. But there are going to be some other situations where sealed records are going to be accessible when an expunged record would not be. So, for example, if you're involved in child custody proceedings, or if you're the subject of a protective order, that sealed record could be accessed with a court order and could come up in those proceedings.
Okay, are there situations when a person would have to disclose?
The sealed record?
Yeah, just in that family law, divorce type of situation.
Yeah. So if...
What about jobs? Go for a job.
Right, so with jobs, sealed records are largely going to be protected. Now, I have to add some caveats because I'm a lawyer and that's what we do. But the big caveats are jobs where there is some kind of federal rule that requires disclosure. So when I'm talking about expunging and sealing records, we're talking about state law. But the federal law trumps state law. So when there's a federal rule that requires disclosure. So say you want to apply to work at a bank. Banks are regulated by the FDIC, which is a federal organization. They require certain records be disclosed, even if they are sealed or expunged. And so, or if you're applying to work, say, at a law enforcement agency, there's exceptions in the law that would require disclosure of sealed records because we don't want people in law enforcement who have certain types of convictions.
Okay, so we come to the point now, what kind of rights, we talked about rights before, civil rights are denied for people with a record. What rights are restored with this expungement? Civil rights that's restored.
Yeah.
Everything, like, can you vote? Can you purchase a gun? Can you firearm? Can you?
So the rights restoration process is separate and apart from the expungement and sealing process. So in Virginia, we're one of just a few states that does not automatically restore people's civil rights upon completion of their sentence. Now that is a separate policy issue, and it's moving in the General Assembly. There's been a constitutional amendment. So in the Virginia Constitution, we're going to have to amend the Virginia Constitution in order for people to automatically get their civil rights back. And what am I talking about when I say civil rights? The right to vote, the right to serve in public office, the right to sit on a jury, and then gun rights as well, although gun rights is also another separate process in Virginia. So that process is proceeding, and there will, the first constitutional amendment bill got through the General Assembly last year. It has to pass again in a new General Assembly, which we have this year, and it's already been proposed. I've seen bills from both Delegate Cherry in Colonial Heights, who's a Republican, and Sia Price in Newport News, who's a Democrat. Both of them have introduced constitutional amendments that would automatically restore someone's rights upon completion of their sentence. That has to pass the General Assembly again, and then go to a referendum of the people, and the people have to approve it before the Constitution would be amended. Okay. But right now, you automatically lose your rights, and then the governor has to restore them on an individual by individual basis in Virginia, and that has been a tremendously difficult process for a whole lot of people to navigate, and so governors have been restoring rights more frequently lately. Governor McAuliffe restored a lot of people's rights. Governor Northam has restored a lot of people's rights. We'll see what Governor Youngkin does, and whether he supports this effort to restore rights automatically.
Okay, so how can citizens who are interested in expungement get involved with you, or with the General Assembly, or any way to kind of push this along?
Sure. So LAJC has been working with a group of really dedicated folks called the Expungement Council. They're mostly directly impacted people. And they have been meeting every couple of weeks for, over a year now. And they have been meeting with legislators. They have been holding rallies in the streets and drawing attention to this issue. So their email address is vaexpungementcouncil@gmail.com. They can also contact the Expungement Council through LAJC. We work really closely with them. So our website is www.justiceforall.org, the number 4. Get in touch with me. I'm rob@justiceforall.org. That's my email. And we can put people in touch.
Okay, we're coming down to the end of our program. What could you tell our audience just what you'd like for them to take in on this great expungement type of area that they may be able to help, they may be able to get more information, but what kind of information you want to leave with the audience?
Sure, I think it's easy to focus on our own lives and forget that there are a lot of folks out there, and you might know people, frankly, who haven't told you about their criminal records because it's something that most people would rather forget. But unfortunately, in their daily lives, they go to apply for a job, they go to apply for housing, for student loans, and they get denied. And that's not something that a lot of people like to talk about, but it happens to more people than I think a lot of people know. And so this is a really important economic issue. It's a really important racial justice issue. And it's just about fundamental fairness when it comes down to it. Are we going to forgive people for what was maybe the worst thing they ever did in their life and think that they're more than just that? and give them a second or a third chance to succeed, to be able to make a living wage and be able to live in suitable housing. That's really what expunging and sealing records is all
Okay,
about.
well, I agree with you because most of the time with a criminal record, you can't get a decent job. Matter of fact, sometimes you can't get a job. You can't get decent housing, as you said. Education is kind of cut off for you because financial aid can't get that. So we're with you. If anything we can do to help out, the Expungement Council will tell our audience, make sure you get the email for the Expungement Council and contact them, and let's get involved. So we're running out of time. I'm just going to say I'm Mel Burruss, your host. This has been our guest, Council.
Rob Poggenklass.
Okay, and the subject has been civil rights and restoration of justice. And I want you to go to Neighborhood Law Center. We have some other programs that we've done before, neighborhoodlawcenter.com, or go to YouTube and just type in Neighborhood Law Center and we'll pop up. So we'll see you next week. Peace and justice.